BlockchainBrett, welcome back to the podcast. How are you doing, man? Thank you for being on again.
Thank you, Adam. I'm excited to be back. It's
Uh,
been a long road since I've been here.
it's been a while, and we were just checking. The last episode we published was on December 2nd, 2021. That was season 3, episode 16. Nearly one whole damn year. That's wild.
Yeah, it's still early.
We're still early. We also minted that episode as well. And funny enough, that episode ended up like being a solid piece that ushered in quite a bit of people into the music NFT spot of where we are today. And that was sort of indicated by just like me tweeting out like, all right, we're minting this episode months and months afterwards, and people commenting like, wow, this was the episode that got me into the space. I'm collecting this, right? So there's a lot to talk about, and that also alludes to like the whole concept of like content NFTs that we're going to be diving into. But I think
Yes.
before we even do that, BlockchainBrett, I want to get a quick primer from you for those who aren't familiar with you and haven't listened to that episode. Give a quick intro on yourself, and then we can dive in.
Yeah, so I go by BlockchainBrett on Twitter, and I am the co-founder and managing partner of Palm Tree Crew Crypto, PTC Crypto for short, which is an early stage venture fund focused on the crypto creator economy. What
Let's
we'll be
go.
talking about today. So an investor and then also a founder and a collector on the founding side. I was in late 2016, I started at Consensus and was a founder of a company there, as well as a company called Fleek in the Web3 developer tools. And I've been collecting since early 2018, starting around crypto art and super rare, representing super rare t-shirt right now for those on audio. And all different types of NFTs. And more recently, one of my biggest focuses has been music NFTs.
Right. So you've been on both sides of the spectrum, both as a founder, also working for a company, and now having your own fund. And I guess like you obviously prefer the investor side, but do you enjoy more collecting from artists and creators versus investing? Like, what do you put a priority over? Like, what do you find the most fulfillment from?
Well, I mean, I put the priority on the fun for sure. But, I've always had an amazing time collecting. Like, it's just been an obsessive, passionate, exciting kind of, yeah, I don't even know if you can call it a hobby. I think it's more than a hobby. It's been ever since like the crypto art days, I've spent hours staring at screens thinking about what to buy, and how to be a part of the NFT craze. So it's amazing.
Can you walk me more through like your collector journey? So you're obviously repping the super rare shirt. I know you were pretty big and early on super rare. Take me through your journey as a collector. What does that look like?
Yeah, so I started really on super rare, and I was like, there's only, I don't know, there's only a couple or a few collectors around then, like, a handful of collectors. And at that time, it was like crazy to spend $50 on a piece of crypto art. I think like I was early to be in like the $300-$400 range. Like I think I might have been like one of the first to spend an ETH on crypto art. Like it was a cold piece. And it was a lot of breaking mental barriers of like people back then used to say, digital art be valuable because it's not physical, right? People don't ask that anymore, obviously, but like back then that was the biggest question.
Right.
And then I think, and then it was the right click save as, right? It's like, oh, if anyone can see it, why is it valuable? Those were kind of the two biggest things to think about. And then I went from like crypto art to like, I want to show off my crypto art and build a gallery. So I bought land in CryptoVoxels. That was the first launch, like, virtual world, on-chain virtual world. So I built a gallery in CryptoVoxels to show off my art. We started collecting like collectibles, like PFP NFTs, all the different kind of categories of whatever was exciting, but like
Sure.
It kind of naturally went from one to the other. And eventually is actually crypto art that kind of led me to music NFTs because of the work I was doing with musicians releasing crypto art and thinking how is like there should be a music specific lane and honestly for all forms of content, but definitely feels like music
Right.
is the natural next step. That's when I started collecting on Zora and Catalog, like April of last year of 2021.
Why do you think that visual artists and then music artists sort of had that first wave of adoption and excitement around NFTs?
I think there was like a Gen there's like a Gen 1.5 music NFTs or something where it was audio visual NFTs, and essentially what was happening is like the big musicians caught their eyes on pretty much on the Blau sale, and looked at it and saw, oh, I can collaborate with a visual artist and release NFTs and kind of be a part of this movement. Um, so there was a lot of that, and I think that a lot of them were like kind of signed to labels and pretty big artists.
Mm-hmm.
So the distribution wouldn't really allow like a pure music NFT, like distributing the song as an NFT directly without it basically being an art piece first. So that's kind of when like the kind of pure music NFT sort of Gen 2, I would say, stuff really started around, just like people releasing songs and not even really needing not even needing cover art. Like cover art is pretty standard,
Sure.
but like maybe even just showing the WAV file icon, you know?
The way I understand the transition is being, first of all, like being in that clubhouse room with when the Blau sale was happening, and sort of seeing the Nifty Gateway era and the super rare era. While I wasn't as active collecting as you were, I was probably more kind of skeptical as to what was happening. One, because I didn't even have the funds to sort of drop 150 bucks, 200, 500 bucks on a piece. And it was
Yeah.
more so me learning from the sidelines. But I remember very early on, there was like the very clear merge between the visual art and the music that got tied to it, right? So people weren't just like minting and drawing up static images that they would do on Photoshop and then tokenize. They would actually create these like GIFs or loops, right, through MP4 files. And with that, there'd be a lot of background music. So the way I sort of understand it is like that transition from visual art to now we're seeing music sort of like be like the front and center piece of attention for NFTs. Kind of makes sense because a lot of the visual artists use music to amplify and to create that end-to-end experience for their visual art. Do you see it the same way, or what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's like, I think once you had crypto art open the barrier of those two major questions, like can digital art be valuable, and like why is it valuable to own if anyone can see it, all of a sudden that model applies to all types of content, right? And like naturally it just depends on like what types of creators are starting to dabble and play around. And there was a bunch of collaborations between visual artists and musicians. um, so I think a lot of musicians got inspired and wanted to be a part of
Right.
it. And there was kind of that like pure Web3 music NFT space coming out from really being pushed from the bottom up on independent musicians. Um, and the same thing we're seeing in kind of smaller little subcategories in other ways. I mean, a lot of people in crypto write articles. People like it's a lot of thought leading type of people that are trying to predict the future a lot. So articles have become a popular medium in crypto, and now you have things like tokenized articles on Mirror
Right.
and Paragraph, and you have even stuff on the video side. People that make music also make music videos, and you start releasing music videos. Music videos can be valuable too, and can be on chain. And you have things like Class, and you have, you know, it's just endless, like all the
Right.
different kind of categories and kind of just how they lean into each other. And I think they kind of just naturally happen depending on how the culture forms.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I wanna transition this conversation and sort of talk about the reason why we're here. You sort of teased this piece that we published in the Mint Season 6 Vault that sort of covers your thesis on the crypto creator economy. And I got to give it to you. It's a very comprehensive piece. And what you put in the vault is only a teaser. And what we're going to go over today is sort of like the end to end 8 page sort of like review of what's happening. And I read through it very diligently. And I want to bring up sort of like, and I guess like steer this conversation based off the structure of the article,
Yeah.
because you actually laid it out very nice, and you sort of started talking about the major problems that are occurring in the creator economy today, in the traditional creator economy, and where crypto comes in. And then you talk about this thing called the NFT content lifecycle, right? And I want to sort of like take it from the top and work our way down. So I don't want to introduce it. What is this article that you put together that you spent so much time
Yeah.
working on and that you tease in the vault?
Yeah. This article has been basically what I've been thinking about and working on for a couple years, and trying to put it in a digestible way for people to kind of put a framework around, like, what is the crypto creator economy, and like what is the way to kind of think about it, and try to help other investors, help founders, help collectors, try to visualize what the framework for this space can be, and how can it kind of grow, and what are the different areas to think about. I've seen, like, I've been collecting for a long time across different verticals of content. I've been building in this ecosystem for a while, and I've been talking to as many founders that are in this area of being like a creator economy focused, like the creator economy focused fund, and seeing it and kind of building this sort of mental model and this sort of framework of how we kind of think about, all the different pillars, and building a framework for it. And I think it'd be helpful, because a lot of times I end up explaining it one-on-one to a lot of different people, and picking out pieces of it to use it to explain or to help guide. And I think, like, it's kind of about time that we, like, put it together, put it in one comprehensive overall article, and put it out there, so that it's not, it's just make it a little more scalable.
Yeah. And I think I love how you started the article basically identifying some of like the weaknesses that are present in the traditional creator economy. From your perspective, like, what are those weaknesses? What comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, so it's kind of interesting. I mean, I think, to give the context of like how I like come at these points, I'm really kind of like a crypto guy. Like, I mean, I've been out of school. I just started working in crypto right away, and just been constantly thinking about the NFT space, and what it can do, what it can change, what features are possible. And so I've kind of come from that direction. And then, like, obviously I've been, a content lover for forever, like everyone. And I have been secondhand to a lot of things in the music industry and different entertainment industries. But this is really kind of like, when you look back and see what do we have that exists today, and what is possible, like, kind of what are the shortfalls of what we have. So that's kind of a little bit of the framework. And I think, like, the first thing that, when you look at like the creator economy today, is like, how do creators monetize, is definitely one of the main pieces. And, the way it happens is like, it's not really value oriented to the creator first, right? So essentially you mostly have like these subscription or these advertisement based business models that charge the end user or advertisers a certain sum for, basically all you can eat content, or for you to basically see, advertisers and get paid per clicks.
Right.
And all of the money they make ends up being basically like accounted for as revenue, and trying to look at it and figure out, all right, what's kind of like the least amount that we can pay out to creators and maintain our bottom line. And they call it a royalty, and it's performance based. It's like, how are you doing on their platform? How much your content is driving that traction for them? And that's what we kind of pay out, and we call it a royalty. And it's become super normal, right? Like, all these different, whatever, record label deals or deals with different types of creators are based on, like, how is your royalty? A lot of it is based on how's your revenue stream going to come from your royalties. So yeah, I mean, obviously in that situation, it's like the platform is getting a lot of the value. The platform is restricting the value of the content itself, right? So, like, they're basically saying they're assigning a value to what everything is worth by charging advertisers, by charging the user for what they think they should pay. And it basically keeps the value of that content under a certain bar, which is why I think when you look at stuff like music and you look at art, or more like music and videos and other types of content like that, they don't grow nearly as fast as industries with different types of business models that are
Sure.
direct valuing them directly, things like
Sure.
gaming, right? So I think it's been a huge limiter. And I'd say one of the other major things is around control. Usually when you're releasing content as a creator, like one of the most important things that I've seen when people coming to Web3 has been like being able to release however you want, when you want, like creative freedom, right? And I think a lot of the ways that creators are able to sustain and make money with different types of agencies are based on like and controlling what they're able to release and how. So this is kind of like, it's a very creative, restricting process, and that's kind of the only way to do it today. So that's the control over your content and over your audience is a major thing.
Yeah.
The audiences themselves are obviously tied to specific platforms as well. Um,
I want to touch upon
yeah,
something really quick, because you bring up two really interesting topics. So the inefficient business models for content, creators don't control their content and their audiences. And when it comes to sort of identifying why is it inefficient, I think creators need to have this sort of like this content dump, and they're slaves to their content to sort of continuously push out new stuff to make the algorithm happy, and to sort of like help them climb up the ladder of distribution and favorability, right? So when I sort of like create content, right, on the element of not controlling it, I publish stuff through Buzzsprout, right? It's a centralized hosting provider that helps distribute all my stuff to Spotify, Apple Music, whatever. If I don't pay them, right, then my content will actually disappear, right? So rather than posting it on chain, just tokenizing my episodes, that's going to live there forever. Like Ethereum will never delete my stuff. Ethereum will never shadow ban me. And it's really up for me to sort of take control of that and to find the distribution and the growth. So I love how you identified, because I face those pain points myself.
yeah, your content stuck to a specific platform, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and really, it kind of goes into another major thing, which is they're not interoperable like these different platforms, right? Like everything that you're doing on one platform and all the kind of UX that they've built around what you're doing in there, whether you're releasing music on Spotify and it's being curated in there, or if you're on Twitch and people are subscribing or engaging with emotes, like these are all within their own guardrails, and that data is not openly available to be built on and expanded on, and it's everyone's kind of creating their own different verticals, and all these things can be amazing shared infrastructure for people to have just the best experience across all different types of content. So it's kind of this sort of guardrail, limitations to what content can do within platforms is another big one. And this kind of last one is really an interesting thing too, where it relates a lot to the business model aspect, where the way the business model is limiting, the way you monetize is all via like upstream value, right? Like, so when you're distributing your music or your videos, like, and you're getting paid your royalties per performance, right? Other forms of ways can be like through syncs, or any different types of avenues where content goes upstream, right? And in these situations, like as a creator, when you have like your content, the way that it can be the most valuable essentially is like by it being the most seen, like distribution. Like you want it everywhere, you want everyone to see it, right? Like what's the most valuable piece of art today is like the Mona Lisa, right? Like everyone in the
Right.
world has seen it. It's on
Right.
everyone's shirt, right? And what happens in this model where like it's you have to, the only way to monetize is by like getting paid for the distribution upstream. It actually makes you like selectively choose where to distribute, right? Like you're not going to put the same song on Spotify and SoundCloud because you can't be free to stream on SoundCloud while it's pay to stream on Spotify. They don't, the companies don't want that, right? But in reality, putting it in both places, putting it in multiple places where it can reach more people is going to expand your audience and increase the potential for more people to interact with it directly and value it, right? So it kind of is the way that content is monetized today also limits the way it's distributed and like the full value that content can reach.
Yeah, one example that comes to mind, especially for the third point, content and media platforms aren't interoperable. There's a specific time period when TikTok started becoming huge, around 2018, and the top grossing, top followed creators on Instagram didn't really make the wave in the cut of all the new creators that formed on TikTok. And now you had this new generation of creators that built crazy audiences on TikTok. But then again, they're dependent on that platform and there isn't much interoperability in the funnels for basically converting a TikTok follower to an Instagram follower. It's still very shitty. So you're forced to sort of siphon your energy, right? And dilute your energy across all these platforms and be a content machine. And I experienced this firsthand myself, trying to attempt to make YouTube shorts and then TikToks and then Instagram reels, right? And they're all essentially like at the core the same type of content, but one requires this form of dimensions and another one requires this length. And you're sort of like scattered across the entire internet trying to tap into all these different ways to grow an audience across these platforms. Versus, and I guess this is what we're going to talk about in crypto, it works a little bit different, right? And this is why I like the piece so much, because you identify these sort of points that trigger and keep a lot of creators stuck and kind of introduce this new light at the end of the tunnel where crypto kind of helps elevate or attempts to elevate all these problems. And I'd love for you to sort of introduce this next section as I also share my screen to kind of talk about where crypto meets the creator economy at this point.
Yeah, for sure. So I think it makes sense to hop into kind of some of these major like values that are so valuable here, and then go into like the whole, what is the framework for the creator economy, how that kind of tease that up. Yeah, I mean the biggest thing here really is the world, the users today. Everyone's online. Everyone loves certain content that they're most drawn to. Loves certain creators that are making that content, right? And basically usually just follows or likes the content, things like that. But where things are going is towards a world where those people are going to be collectors. Your favorite content that you find and you love and you find the most value with, the best way to create a relationship to prove the meaning that you have with that content and be connected to it and to own it is via NFTs, collecting that content. So that's really where the overall broad category is essentially like content NFTs. We say crypto art, we say music NFTs, video NFTs. We've even have some glimpse of podcast NFTs, the ones that, I mean, our podcast was minted, the one that I was on with you on Mint. There's still some earlier categories, and it's very early on, right? And like we've seen most traction with art, we've seen some pretty significant start to traction on music, and these other areas are growing as well. And that's really the foundation of it. Like the most valuable thing when it comes to the creator economy is creators and their content, right? And that's what powers all these platforms, what powers the audiences to come to them. So really it just comes to the beginning where like the creator puts their content on chain is the start of it. And what that enables is this new business model of collectors that are valuing the content directly, right? So when we were saying earlier, like, you don't have the ability to like unlock the full potential of the content, and it's restricted within the business models of current Web 2, which is like subscription or advertising and paying out this back end royalty. It's direct to your audience saying, I love what you're making. I love what you're creating. I love your art. I love your music. This means something to me and I want to own it. Right.
Yeah.
That it comes with a lot. A lot comes with that, right? Like there's the obviously the value is that emotional attachment for sure to the piece of content, to the artist. There's a relationship component that you're developing with the artist that's much deeper than anything you can do today. That like there's a two-way signal that they want people to appreciate the content. You're the one that appreciates the content,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's even beyond that, there's really a social signal too, right? Like more people are like you, will be like you, and will also find emotional connection and want that relationship with the content, with the artist. And you're one of those people that were already doing it, right? You're a curator. People like
Mm-hmm.
there's a social value and signal to saying to people realizing. I mean, like I find a lot of pride, like confidence in collecting X copy in 2018. Like that's crazy, right? Now people think it's insane. Like back then, that's the point, right? It's like back then it wasn't that crazy, but when you believe in something, you're a part of it. That is your opportunity to curate. And yeah, that's pretty much like the main foundation here. Um, and obviously people can continue to like add additional
Right.
functionality to existing content out there, but it is worth really stressing that like just the content being on chain in itself and being able to be collected is a magnitude of order improvement, and it's enough to really change the business model to like 100x improvement. um
I
and
agree.
once you're yeah
No, I was gonna say just like on this new 0 to 1 model of collecting to show patronage, right? And collecting to show the creator that you were there at this given time, and I can prove that with whatever's in my wallet is incredibly impactful. And it's why I've personally reverted as a creator, as a podcaster, to give out pins to my listeners, because they act as this thing that they can prove that they were there since day zero for them collecting whatever it is that they're collecting, right? So even now, like I'm in the process of giving out my season 6 pins, and a few people in Discord are like, yeah, I've been collecting since season 2, and that shows me like shit, like you've been there for the longest time. And shout out to Charlie for pinpointing that out and like being, I've been here since season 2. I remember when you were doing them as po-ops, and now you're issuing them as NFTs.
yeah
And
yeah and you
there's
saw,
a
and you
there's a
saw it
different
too
connection.
when we did the like when you minted the music NFT podcast that I was on with you. How much meaning came out. Like you were saying earlier, it's like people were coming to you saying, this podcast means, like, I learned about music entities here. This is
Yeah,
why I bought my first one. He's mentioned Daniel Allen. I bought Daniel Allen. Like I love his music now. Like it was a gateway for me. There's all sorts of reasons why people find meaning in that piece of content, and also in you, right? That you're creating this series of content that continues to come, and people will wait for the next one and continue to learn more. And so you're a creator here, right? There's value. So people value that and want, and what happened? I mean, like it did like an ETH in sales. I mean, I don't think
which is
you weren't
great
expecting
because
that, right?
I was not expecting that, because I don't even get paid from Spotify or Apple Music on the streams just like musicians do, right? So
Yeah,
it's monumental to me.
it's it's crazy, and I think that we kind of underestimate like how much people find meaning and are willing to like show that and do it via essentially like online ownership, content ownership. And that's kind of really the beginning there. I mean, I think you're at the end of the day, you'll end up being a pioneer in that spot. And I'm very confident there'll continue to be more podcasts on
I
chain.
agree. I agree. And I want to just double down for a minute. The section talking about like NFTs being a new economic model for content. My question to you, Bright, it's like the same thing that we talk about in the music NFT side of things. Like, how can we convert more listeners into collectors? Because every collector is a listener, but not vice versa. How can we convert every single or more viewers into collectors and to actually care about owning something? And I think part of it starts with the early adopters that sort of start that energy and that emotion to kind of prove this like first mover advantage of saying, we were here, we're doing this, and this is why it's important. And that brings on more attention and more energy. But from your perspective, like how do we siphon more of the viewers and the likers and the people who share across Web 2 to also now collect, even if it's something for free, just like collect something in Web 3?
Yeah, I think we can really get into that around like the content life cycle, because I think in reality the core here is the content being great and people loving it, right? And I think once you start by like once content's on chain and has that business model baked in, then it becomes how do you distribute it natively from being on chain, right? And how do you push that content upstream through its life cycle, where the future is when you find a podcast, when you find music, it's on an application that you have the ability to opt in and value it and be a part of the journey with the creator, right? And that makes it just knowing that, even from personal experience, is a 10x plus improvement. Like when I'm on Spotify, I listen to music, which I still go on Spotify. I listen to music NFTs on Spin App. I listen to Spin App way more than I listen to Spotify these days, right? Like, and the thing is, for me, is now when I'm listening on Spotify, the new song that I'm listening to that's coming out that I'm checking out, right, needs to be so much better than it used to need to be for me in order for me to like kind of stick around, because I know there's no opportunity for me to really be a part of it, you know? And like when I'm over here on Spin Up, I'm listening to songs, like I know every single song. If I like it, if I get into it, I can like start to opt in to value it and be on a journey with this creator, right? And like, so it just makes the experience so much better. And I love having that opportunity. So I think the long story short is you need the content to be first and foremost, and then it also to be natively on top of this, crypto Rails NFT infrastructure, that people are able to go and take it to the next level and understand what's going on behind the scenes and be a part of it. Right.
Right. Part of having a crypto empowered and crypto enabled creator economy is being in control of your content and your community. And I think it's actually incredibly powerful. And I try to emphasize this a lot on the podcast, like one follower equals one collector. Like I try to minimize that model for me so that I can focus more on building a collector base, even if it's free collectors, right? It's still sort of like building something on chain, right? 100%. And I'm curious, Brett, from your perspective as someone who's advocating for kind of like creators having more control over the content, what does that really mean in the grand scheme of things, and what level of responsibility comes with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest pieces of feedback I've seen is how much artists, creators in the space love the creative freedom of being able to basically create, distribute however they want, whenever they want, and whatever which way, and even be innovative on top of that. So I think people like that's usually the first realization. It's like, oh wait, like I can just do it however I feel like doing it. Like I don't need to like using agencies or focus on any specific distribution models or right. So that's kind of like a major thing. And then, beyond that, it's like you own your relationship, right? Like when you mint something on chain, people are collecting your NFTs. Like, who those collectors are. It's immutable. It's on chain. Like you can port that anywhere. You could, go and build a new site next day and make it where all the access or, whatever features, the ability to mint or exclusive content or whatever it is on this site, and it's to those tokens. And then, that's really like you ported your community to a different site, like just like that. Right. And I think that is the most powerful thing, is like when you're doing things and you're experimenting and trying new products or whatever it is, there's kind of like way less risk, like way less platform risk, because you still have power, the power that you need and the control you need with your community to bring them around. So there's much less risk there.
Yeah, I would also argue, and I'd love to get your perspective, that like Web3 has done a great job at helping creators capture value, but it still really struggles with distribution, messaging, and algorithms for sort of like grabbing attention. And one thing that I repeat on the podcast is like the model is creators using Web2 for distribution and attention, and Web3 to capture value, right? And eventually, and I know down the line in the article you talk about Web3 social, like the two will converge. And not only are you going to be building an audience using Web3 primitives, but you're also going to be able to capture value simultaneously, right? Versus it being two separate things. But right now, we're seeing a lot of people still use Twitter to create that initial funnel of distribution to get the word out, trying to build their newsletters, right? Yeah. And we're seeing Mirror and Paragraph create more Web3 native sort of like newsletters from the primitive of collecting to subscribe, right? But it's still not there yet, and we can't simply detach completely, right? Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where this gets basically. I think what the business model here kind of does is like it makes it where you know where you kind of monetize and where you know where the value accrues, which is to your NFTs at the end of the day, right? So like essentially similar to how the business model on like existing Web2 platforms is from royalties. It's like this new model is it's from volume for the most part, right? From sales, right? From your ability to issue content and it be valued directly and people purchasing it. And, so you have the ability to continue to release more as you grow your community, which is like continuing to monetize, as well as the secondary sales, the creator royalties that happen from the secondary sales of the content NFTs, right? So with that at the foundation, it becomes way more open where you can distribute, right? Like a lot of these concepts around the distribution rights are in order to try to grab value upstream because you don't monetize at the bottom of the funnel, right? It's like when you release a song or when you release content, it's like, how is it performing? And I want to get paid. And like, you don't distribute somewhere else because that place doesn't pay you and this place does pay you, right? And that's where in this situation, it's like the monetization model is at the bottom of the funnel and it captures anything upstream, right? So it's how far, wide, big on distribution can I go, right? So it's anything by means necessary, right? Which is why you see things like already like crypto art and music NFTs being like freely distributed on platforms, right? Like things like Gallery on crypto art, Spinamp, Future Tape around music. Like no creators are complaining and saying, "Hey, what are you doing? Like distributing my music? Like you're not paying me for that." It's like, no, that's not the business model anymore. It's like you're selling your content, right? And the more it's seen, the more it's distributed, the more valuable it is, the greater chance of selling content. Those distribution platforms now have buy buttons, right? Because like it's once you find the content, it's how do you get them from discovery down to ownership, right? And that's kind of like the new future, and it's use anything. So yeah, for sure. I mean, all forms of social media today. I mean, it's by any means necessary. Like put it out there, like Twitter, Instagram, anything, right? I mean, obviously, a lot of the audience today lives on Twitter for sure.
Right.
But I think as these applications move into specific types of content, and people know what things you're looking for, you're looking for music, you're looking for videos. What is it? That's the area they'll come in, right? And it'll be kind of content first, ideally.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
The other three sections, so NFT accruing sort of the content's value, communities owning cultural equity and creators, and the composable content or media Legos. I feel like we touched on the first two quite a bit. When you sort of like collect something, you buy into that creator's community, right? And then you're part of their growth from that point on, right? And the
100%.
more things that the creator does, the more value that they consistently and communicate outward, saying that this is going to go straight back to the collectors, right? And sort of like the value that's generated from there, that sort of comes from the NFTs accruing value as the content gains value. The one thing I want to touch upon that we didn't really talk so much about is this element of composable content or media Legos. I love that because I think that's very much subliminally distribution. Very very bluntly saying. And I think a good example of that is seeing sort of like behaviors across TikTok and how people duet a video, right? And how they sort of repurpose somebody's existing piece of content and kind of add their own creative twist to it. And I think a good example of that is seeing what Daniel Allen was doing with his Glasshouse remixes. And now he's bringing other sort of like music artists into Web3 and using his music as a way to kind of like navigate their compass, right? How are you sort of understanding media Legos or composable content?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, so I'll give a quick shout out. I think the first person that said like did the quote unquote media Legos, Jesse Walden. So definitely some inspiration there. But yeah, on the composable content, I mean, it's really like on that side for sure, like co-creation, production, big part of it. I think like on another level, a lot of it's really like everything you see within these applications that's being built infrastructure wise around, how is content discovered, how is it curated, how is it just engaged with, right? Like all these different applications have their own different kind of ways, and they build their own layers, and these are all like very ripe pieces of infrastructure that can be composable once things are content NFTs. Like once the content is on chain and it can move and distribute freely upstream to any platforms, you can also start to use shared infrastructure protocol tools around how we can interact with content. How do you curate it? How do you engage with it, right? So there's all these kind of different layers of interacting with content that have these opportunities for new protocols and shared infrastructure to come out, that different distribution interfaces that focus on different types of content can decide which things to integrate and use, and create the best experience for their end user. So yeah, and much more like an open ecosystem. So I think that's kind of really like the heart and the focus, and also down towards like the remix production co-creation side of things. It enables a lot of that as well, for sure.
Yeah. And I think this is also a perfect transition to sort of highlighting kind of like the content NFT life cycle. And I wanna introduce this next section of the podcast, just sort of sharing my screen. And for those that are listening, I'll kind of read it off, because I think from my perspective, you were the first person to sort of like tweet something like this out and to present content NFTs as like the top of funnel sort of primitive, and all these other pieces of media kind of fall underneath it, right? So content NFTs, as the tweet continues, content NFTs, crypto art, music NFTs, video NFTs, writing NFTs, podcast NFTs, TV NFTs, film NFTs. All content is coming on chain and will be a foundationally new business model for the creator economy. So that's your bet. Everything is going to be tokenized to some extent, right? And everything is going to be worth collecting. But my question to you, I want to challenge this for a second. Like, what is actually worth collecting, and what do you actually tie attribute value to versus attribute something for free? And how do you kind of like, what's the mental model around this entire new primitive?
What it does is it gives the ability for all content to be valuable. Doesn't mean every piece of content is like going to be valued, right? Like it's similar, and that's where it comes. Like right now, there's a small amount of content so far in this ecosystem, and that's going to continue to grow, right? And over time, that's where things like more types of infrastructure become more important around discovery and creation and engagement tools to kind of help people find and decipher and figure out things that they essentially find valuable, and take ownership in. And yeah, so it's going to be valuable when people find it. So like you find it's usually comes, I mean, I think it should come from the quality of the content first. It could be, the artist, the creator behind it, something that it means to you, some reason why you like it. And that's something you want to have a relationship with. So, I think like if you had 1 million songs come in tomorrow, right? Like it would be impossible to get all of them to be to get valued correctly because of where the market is right now, right? But yeah, I think there's this kind of like, as more content comes, more collectors come, and more things continue to get valued, and it's similar to in some ways to like currently where like people have to find things they like not everything is seen and appreciated, right? But for those things that those things have the ability to have that now and be appreciated directly, and it's a much better foundation for the future of that.
Yeah, makes sense. And as we sort of transition to really break down the content NFT life cycle, I'm going to bring back the initial graph that I brought up earlier.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a good visualization to understand what is the content NFT lifecycle and all the different pieces that kind of fit as a downward stream, right? And I guess just to quickly outline it, and then we can dive into each sort of segment, is you have the element of actually producing the content, and then once it's produced, you mint and tokenize the content, and after you mint it, you distribute it, and then you have curators that sort of like help bring even more eyes to it and have their sort of taste making abilities projected on it, right, as a signal. And then you have the level of engagement that comes around it, right? I would love for you to kind of like break down every single section, because there's also like another component. There's a community coordination to it and how that fits into the whole entire funnel of Web3 social, right? As you imagine. So let's double down on what the content NFT lifecycle is, and just take it away.
Yeah, let's do it. So I'll help kind of paint the picture too. Really, like what, like I think about it like this: like content NFTs kind of create this framework where there's all these different verticals of content, from art to music to videos to podcast to writing, right? And it kind of goes that way, right? As well as the way the content goes upstream, right? So take something like a piece of music and how it's co-created in the production style, right? Like in the production layer, right? So you know, having the stems, the songs, and it being findable and remixable, right? Like that's a layer, right? And then minting that song on chain is a layer, right? Like basically instantiating it on chain and making it able to be valued, right? That piece of content NFT then being distributed upstream, right? So listener apps or video players or all these different, depending on the vertical of content, like what you need, like what we're used to around things like Spotify bringing up content or YouTube showing videos or Netflix showing TV and film. And then, as it's being distributed or part of like the distribution funnel as well, it's like, how is this content curated, right? So like traditionally you might have creation kind of in a more centralized way where companies create their own playlists, or you have your own, highlights and features and right. And it's kind of like this sort of top down, or maybe you give a certain artist, a certain creator, the ability to have like a playlist or a set of curated content. And then there's an opportunity now to like essentially bring together creators to like vote as communities, to find content together, vote as communities, and help bring up and rise the content they love the most. So, you might not necessarily be like an artist minting, or you might not be someone collecting, but you could be in the circle of like communities that are finding certain types of content or even genres of content within that type of content, and helping like, when people say, oh, I was the person that found that artist and brought him and then they signed a record label, or what, it's like, now this happens on chain. Like communities can vote and actually like do it on chain, and these are these kind of pointable, these data points that are accruing. And then beyond, like, once you're kind of curated, maybe that helps with distribution, getting into more interfaces as well. Then that content is like, even more upstream. It's being engaged with, right? So like a good example, something like on Twitch, where like you're reacting in streams with emotes and getting your questions answered, or on TikTok we're reacting with hearts live, or on Instagram like hearts live during streams, and right. And this is like, how do you do that kind of on chain? Is like, you can think of like basically value backed emotes, right? Like not like basically a level above ownership, and a level above like you created or helped this artist get to that point essentially, or elevate that artist. But now it's like, you're someone that found it and you love it, and you're doing some form of engagement. Maybe you're buying like their emote packs and you're spending it towards it. And these are like NFT based emotes that are directly giving money to the creator as you're enjoying the content, right? It's kind of like a lower level of engagement before you might go into like, you're looking for helping other artists, or even going into like ownership of the content of that artist, right? So like I kind of look at it from that way as we build it out. But in reality, it's going to start coming the other way for users, right? Users will come in, they'll be in a distribution focused app, they'll engage with some content, maybe they'll get to the point where they're helping curate some of the content, right? Maybe they'll end up buying some of the content they love, right? And like, so that's kind of, the different kind of layers and ways that if you like kind of unbundle the existing creator economy and say, all right, how does this sort of work in Web3, and what are these layers that we need to see here that we still need to build for? And people are building for these layers, right? And across all different verticals of content. You might even be able to say, it's like, one of the questions is are these layers kind of content specific, or are they cross content? And I think it's a question almost for, each little sort of cross section of like, whether it's creation within music or creation in videos, or is it, music first and then you create there, or, it's like you can kind of look at it from any different direction when you're thinking in those kind of different boxes. So the content that's kind of really diving into the content life cycle pretty specifically, right? And then you also kind of have, it's like, all right, in this world of like your collectors are valuing your content, and that's how you're basically building your community. Like your community is now like just your token holders, right? And so now there needs to be new infrastructure for how do you coordinate your community that's now on chain holding and owning tokens, right? And obviously one of those really key things that happens the second you own something is you want to be able to communicate, and so messaging is a key part of that. Right? Like, and so we look at things, it's like on-chain messaging, like natively is very important, like decentralized messaging infrastructure, right? How do you talk to someone directly from wallet to wallet? Maybe you're filtering your wallet based off token ownership. I don't want people to just message me because I have my wallet. I only want people to message me because maybe if they have certain assets, right? Or if they're within the same communities that I'm in. That's a key. That's a big layer, right? And then also as you move from there, it's like, as a community, how does the community get more involved in the creator and the content lifecycle? It's, around governance. It's around like voting on things, trying to build a treasury, building like a, like a chest of a treasury that can go and be active and basically work together to help proliferate the content and the artists, right? That's where you're going in and you're kind of crossing over the content lifecycle, and you're helping with distribution and creation and engagement and, working together along those things. Also, there could be people that are, like helpful, like directly skilled in things that creator needs, and they're already in their community. Instead of going out and saying, hey, how do I find a marker? How do I find, someone to master the song, or someone that edits, videos, like you can now create this opportunity for like earning, right? So like think about concepts like, all right, like sure, people are selling NFTs today, but over time, as you want to give more people the ability that are adding value to your community, to have ownership in your, in your career and your journey as an artist. Now maybe you say, oh, like if you do these certain sets of things, like you can earn this NFT. Like BlockchainBrett over here is spending all this money on it. You don't, like if you do these, like you can just earn it, right? So it's another way. And then like that's really where it gets interesting, in like all the different levels of earning, and kind of how do you scale those earning opportunities, right?
Social tokens.
And the size of the community is really where you get to like the social tokens. So we went from messaging, governance, and treasury to earning, now to social tokens, where it's like social tokens is like a community scaling opportunity. Basically, the way to kind of think about it is like you start, like you want your content to be valued, so you start releasing content. And then more and more people, the demand to value your content grows. So you start to essentially release more content, or maybe more editions of that content. And at a certain point, you imagine it'd get to the level where it's like, there is more people that love my content than I'm willing to essentially dilute the value of my content. Like, I don't want to have this many editions, this many pieces of content out, because like it feels like it's too much for this piece of art, right? And I want to keep it to this level, right? And at that point, it's like, okay, you can basically create like a wide exposure. And also, when you're buying NFTs, it's specific pieces of content usually, right? So like, how do you go and say, all right, I'll give this kind of like wide exposure sort of asset that is the lowest price denomination entrance and can be earned more quickly right, than the NFTs, right? And that's kind of like this social token layer makes a lot of sense. And we haven't really seen much of this yet in scale. We've seen some experiments.
Sure.
And it makes sense because creators are still kind of developing. It's almost like you get to like audience market fit essentially. And then you say,
Right.
okay, like now I'm ready to release
Right.
this social
Right.
token. It's similar to how you have like a Uniswap with a product getting a product market fit and then saying, all right, like here's the Uniswap token. We're going to expand it and create incentive mechanisms and take it to scale it to the next level, right? So it's kind of like that progressive decentralization for creators is kind of like where the social token comes in. So yeah, we just dove into the whole content lifecycle, the whole community coordination aspect, and these things are constantly crossing over, right? Social tokens can be a form of engagement around content. Earning could be earning like the minted NFT directly, or earning like right, or like your community directly around governance could be involved in the creation aspect. So like there's a lot of like middling between these two constantly, right? And like your community participating and supporting the content lifecycle that your content and they want to proliferate that content for the creator, right? And then basically all this stuff, it's happening on chain, right? All this data, all these things are building, these powerful relationships. Did you curate that artist? You help them get the distribution that they deserved, right? Do you own their work since the beginning? Did you engage with the content early on that, like that you love and it means something to you? It's like all these, it's like there's nothing even close to these levels of relationships and this depth of relationship via ownership in the current Web2 social paradigm. We have likes and follows, right, and subs, and like there's a huge disconnect. This is bridging that, like the ability to be involved, be part of the artist's journey, have cultural equity, have real on-chain like data to point to that you were there and what you did and how you're part of it, right? And so that all the community coordination aspects around what did you vote on, what did you earn, and then around the content lifecycle around what do you own, what have you curated, what have you engaged with, all that just becomes this really valuable data. And all these collectors also have relationships with each other, who's done what, the same stuff, or what have you done differently, and become this like all this data to basically say, all right, how do we show that and like show these relationships and show all the stuff that's going on that's so valuable. And that's the Web3 social layer. That's where it all kind of comes together, and where there's so much innovation to be had around like what is the best way to show relationships on chain, right? Like who are your mutual, it's crazy. Like if you look at the market today so far, like there's like who are your mutual collectors? Like what do you collect together, right? And I think a lot of these things is like ownership becomes the big centerpiece here, is like how do you find other artists, right? Instead of us doing these different AI models and stuff, like it could be like who are your highest mutual collectors. Like me and Koopa Troopa are good friends, but I bet you on chain we're even better friends. Like we've collected a lot of the same artists. We love a lot of the same artists. Who are the artists that he's collected in a large amount that I haven't collected, right? I would love to know that, right? Yeah. Like that's how I want to discover. That's what we want to do, ownership based, like social, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the opportunities really come here to say, like a lot of people say the narrative has become a lot of like, what's the utility? You need to have utility. It's like there is so much utility here. It's just not easy to see it yet because all the relationships that are going on, all the emotional connections that are being had we just need to display them. We need to show them better. We need to make people realize what's happening, and like show what they're feeling, right? And so yeah, I'm really excited for the Web3 social layer, and I think that's where a lot of it comes together. And that's kind of really like, I know I probably could have started by saying, here's the different categories and tops, and let's dive into each one. But we kind of went into detail on each one the whole way through all of it. And yeah, and I think like, look, this framework, this kind of way of thinking, like it's still early. Like, there's been a lot of thoughts to kind of like develop this and to help think about it. And I think, I've been saying it and it's been really helpful for founders. And I hope that like people can see this and say, oh, like that makes sense. And like, this is what's missing. And these are the pieces that need to be built. And, as an artist, I should be pushing in these directions. Like, yeah, who are the apps doing that? Like, I want my content to be going upstream like that and using these things. And like, there's so many cool apps, right? You have like, if you look at the kind of just the music landscape, you have in all those categories, you have stuff like in the co-creation, you have things like Arpeggi, where like you have samples that anyone can find and come and remix, right? In the minting layer, you have stuff like Sound, Zora, Catalog, where people are going and minting music and having people come and value them and buy them, right? In the distribution layer, you have stuff like SpinApp, you have things like Future Tape, where the music is being distributed to take into the listening experience specifically, right? Around the creation stuff, you have things like Heads, right? Heads is creating a community around a group that votes around content anonymized every so often, and the top, the top voted on artists essentially get accepted into these different sort of curated platforms, or you could look at it as the final 10 artists that get accepted as like a playlist of like what the community chose, right? It's a centralized playlist. You go on the side of it, when you go to community coordination, you see like around music, like how are these communities coming together, talking to each other, you have things like Songcamp, where it's like a leading, like a music NFT community, right? You have things like Daniel Allen's Telegram, and you have his, how he, like, we haven't even really gotten to like, how are you gonna make your community earn? How are you gonna, like, what's the best way to do a social token long term for the whole artist, right? And governance and treasury and these things, like, it's still early in these different layers, and not that many stuff has been built out. Centralized messaging, we see things like, XMTP and stuff like Relay being built on top of it, where you have, like wall-to-wall messaging that can be built directly into apps. So like, that's the point, is like, apps are coming, builders are coming, shippers are coming, and they're building out like this kind of ecosystem of things, and artists are also are paving the way in these areas, right? They're like, like you're saying, like, you have basically historical artists like Oshi that were the first to be on Arpeggi, the first to be on Sound, the first, like, pushing in the direction and being these different things. So it's like, for artists, it's like, I hope it helps to say, all right, like, what are the different areas that I should be expanding on and pushing my content towards? And because it's so early that they're not even built yet, you need to kind of know what to look for. For builders, shippers, it's like, what are things out there need to be built? There's a lot of stuff today. You might look, and when music NFT platforms are doing well, it's easy to come for new people coming in the space to say, oh, I want to build a music NFT platform, right? And it's like, there's other things that need to be built that, in this world of composability, can be layered on top. You can be partners and work with and be close partners with these different platforms that exist today, which like isn't really a possibility before. Everyone just has to be competing. You can build the next layer of infrastructure for music, or you can go to the next vertical of content that doesn't exist, right? And you can start building and tying and looping an infrastructure that exists to that side of it, right? So, it's like, what do we build? Where do artists go? How should collectors think about the future of this space and the opportunity that we have here, and how big this can really be, and what it means to be like participating in this at this point is also a big part of it, right? So it's kind of like, hopefully it's like kind of a bit of inspiration and some clear thinking around like, what does this kind of look like, right, in a few years plus, right? And what are we kind of building towards? And I think this is like a really exciting future where like it's just so much better, like it's so much better for the artists, the creators, and for the audiences, right? Like, for the artists and creators, it's like all those benefits we talked about: having control, monetizing directly to your content, having creative freedom, being able to take your community anywhere you want to go. Like, this is the world that is like 100 times better for artists than it is what exists today, right? And that's why it makes a lot of sense for artists. The market's still early in a lot of these places, but it makes sense for artists to come and to be the next generation, and to just to be a part of it and to be building with it, right? And at the same time, on the audience side, it's like, this has been the best experience ever yet for audiences. Like, I mean, if you just take my example personally, it's a pretty extreme one, but like, I was collecting, for instance, Daniel Allen, Matthew Chaim on Catalog in the early days. Eventually, like at this point, like, I consider Daniel Allen one of my closest friends. I bought his NFT before I even met him, right? Like, this is a world we live in where like the ability to grow and create relationships with people online first are just being taken to the next level. right? Like 10 times. You can't. How can you do that? What are you going to do if you like a certain artist and you want them to see you? You're going to follow them. You're going to like their photo. You're going to comment on. You're going to DM them and hope they answer you. There's no other way to really do it, right?
Yeah.
So like this is like it's just so much better. And then in addition, when you look at this kind of like business model that flips the distribution aspect, right? It says, hey, like you want the content to be more wide stream and you want it to be more distributed, and so people can find it and come down to the content. Think about that from the artist perspective. It's like a relief. I don't have to think about how to chase everything all the way up. Like I have my place where it monetizes, and like I'm just trying to grow that top of the funnel as much as possible, so that basically I can monetize down towards the content, all at the end at the content, right? Like directly at the content level. And then for the collector, the consumer side, content is even more free to consume. Like everything is now distributed freely, right? Like I can go and listen to anything I want for free, right? And then because the concept is that you now, when you love something, you have the opportunity to engage with it and value it. You have the opportunity to curate things and help artists and own content and value it directly. And what that does at the same time is it unlocks the value of what it can be, right? Like if you zoom out and say, all right, what is the size of the art market, the traditional art market, versus the size of the music industry, right? It's traditional art market is $80 billion a year. Music industry is around 40, right? It's half the size, which is like insane to think about because like music is massive. Like, right? Yeah. We have Spotify built on it. We have TikTok built on top of it. We have music festivals weekly all around the world, hundreds of thousands of people. We have so many musicians uploading music constantly. Right. It's crazy, right? So like, how does that make sense that it's right? And it's kind of interesting because art, so the traditional art, like physical art, is kind of the only type of content that already has this business model where you value art and you're a collector of art directly, right? So it's kind of like it's really using that and taking that model. And what happens is the size of this industry can become unlocked. Huge. The value of each piece of content is more than $10 a month per user. It's people buying songs for thousands of dollars from one person. Now, instead of one person spending $10 per month on all the content they can consume, they might end up spending thousands of dollars just on one song that they like, right? Or one piece of art, or one, right? So this is like the unlock of the value potential. Basically, brings the size of like this is a similar business model to gaming, in-game items. When you buy items in a game, right? Fortnite skins or whatever. That's how they're making all this money. Is they're having people like value items directly in the game and buy them. Like that's how they make them. It's like basically bringing that like valuing content, valuing online things directly to creators and giving it the exponential size how gaming has grown, right? It's like a huge unlock, right? This business model. So I think like what we have here is just like a green field, like, or it's not green. I mean, there's just people that are building a space and it's more developed than most people think it is, right? But it's early and there's a lot to build. There's a lot of artists to come. There's, more builders to come. There's a lot of collectors to come, right? And these behaviors we have that seem kind of crazy, collecting music, is going to be very normal. It's going to be very common. And it's not about, hey, how do we say, oh yeah, music NFTs, like that's just the first iteration, but how does it scale? It's like you're looking at something, the reason why you're excited about it is because of what's there. And you're saying, how do we like actually do something different to take the next level? It's like, let's focus on what's working and expand on that, right? We have like what this space is doing is amazing and it's just going to continue to grow. And how do we make that better? Thank God SpanUp is coming and building out the music listener experience. We need music NFTs to be listened to more. We need music NFTs to be content. Thank you, heads. We need engagement layers. There's not really much engagement layers yet. There's really not, right? We need like all these things to like kind of rebuild on this new foundation. It's a very new system in a lot of ways, right? So it's a really exciting future. We're still like really early in it. Like I would say like where are we at right now, right? Is like and like kind of what journey have we been on, right? Like I mentioned when I was collecting crypto in 2018. That's kind of like where like the first piece of content really started is around art. And I was mentioning that like the business model is already like that for physical art. People in the beginning of crypto art were asking questions like, can digital art be valuable, right? Right-click save as. Like if anyone can see it, why is it valuable to own it, right?
Sure.
We've gotten over that hump.
Sure.
big time. The crypto art industry is like pretty big. It's like a $1 billion or whatever industry at this point of market cap, right? You have people selling things for close to $100 million, right? So like the thing is it kind of makes sense that came first because you already have the physical art parallel. Even with the physical art parallel, people were questioning it, right? Now you have it where like people were wrong that question it. Like digital art can be valuable, NFTs make it ownable. Doesn't matter who everyone can see it. It actually makes it more valuable. That's why you have people like Xcopy going CCO and making it completely available for anyone to remix or whatever. Because at the end of the day, he wants to sell NFTs, right? And then what's interesting is like the music thing, how it's come culturally from like art and the kind of like collaborations that were there, but then there's kind of this like independent artist, independent musician movement that started like kind of in this counterculture sub niche area and built out into what it is now, which is still a counterculture, right? Is like I think the first time that we've had this business model of valuing content directly applied to a type of content that wasn't like that before, right? Music is valued via what we talked about before, like the subscription, advertising models, royalties, right? Same thing with videos, same thing with film, same thing with whatever, articles, Medium, all these things are like, that's the model, right? Netflix subscription, right? Like these are the same models for all those types of content. And it's like, whoa, if this makes so much sense for all types of content, why can't music be valuable? Why can't people value it directly? It's the same question that people were saying, like digital art can be valuable because it's not physical. It's like, well, it works, it's digital. Music is digital too. Music can be valuable, right? People love music. We're already starting to see it, right? Why, if anyone can listen to it, why is it valuable to own? Same thing. Right. More people listen to it, the more valuable it actually is. Right. Less, there's just only certain people that own it, right? Like, and these same principles, these same foundations are beginning to go into other areas. We have things like Glass and XYZ building video NFTs, having a market, really starting. It's still small. It's smaller than music NFTs, but it's growing, right? You have things like Mirror and Paragraph doing article NFTs. You have people like you, like right, doing podcast NFTs. That's very niche. There's not a podcast NFT platform yet, right?
Right.
But like all these things, film, TV has started. There's things like that are doing. There's some interesting stuff. It gets a little interesting in different types of content that are like heavier lift. Basically, like you need the money before you start, kind of thing, right? Then the model becomes, and also live content is a little different too, right? Because it's like music, art, podcasts, etc. You're putting it out finished, and people are listening to it when it's edited, etc. Right? And the cost is virtually low. It's low. It's a low cost to create these things, right? You right, and that's where it's like when you start to get into things like live streaming, how is it natively on chain, right? So there's cool ways to do it, right? Like and mechanisms that I think we just need to figure out. Same thing with film, right? Where it's like it's not released yet. Film is even more extreme, where it takes a lot of work up beforehand before you can and money and costs, right? So those are like some question marks. I mean, I have some pretty good thoughts, answers around those as well. But yeah, I think like that's where we're at. It's like we're music. It's gonna work for all types of content, and it's a better business model for all types of content. And there's a whole new ecosystem of things be built upstream. There's a whole ecosystem of things be built to coordinate communities that are now on chain. And there's going to be a whole new layer of how people show off their relationships showing from on-chain data. That's the crypto creator economy.
So I love the conversation about on-chain data because I think a lot of creators can tap into more of that data that they do own and capture more of the value that they create. Capturing value extends beyond just like making a couple ETH. It's also understanding who your collectors are and understanding that data and being better equipped to make better decisions and be more strategic with how you do things, right, for your community. And I love your example of like a creator kind of like understanding like what are the overlaps between his community and other communities and what they could sort of do together to cross collaborate and to create further distribution, whether it be for an existing drop that's in the process of minting, preparing for a future drop, whatever it may be, even creating content together. Like one thing that I noticed is that a lot of my pin collectors, they're also native to Zora. And for the longest time, I never really created content with Zora. And then I've been creating more content alongside two of like Zora's executives, and those episodes outperformed other episodes, right? And just understanding sort of like what my collectors like and being able to sort of take action on that has been super rewarding. With this entire monologue that you gave, which I love it, it's very powerful. I can't help but think, are we building a new creator economy centered around collecting or consuming?
Both. I mean, consuming and then collecting. Free to consume, valuable to own, right? Like that's, I think, what we need to see and what's starting to happen. Like, I think in addition to like how, I was saying like it's opening up to new types of content. Music is essentially a gateway, right? Music has also made it clear about what these other layers are and what we need to bring on chain, right? So now when you look at music, you say, oh, like, how is it created? How is it produced? How is it created? How is it distributed? How is it, curated, engaged with all those layers, right? And now, like, we know, okay, it needs to be distributed. These things are naturally happening. Like, the content is the centerfold. The creator in the content is centerfold. And then now that they're making content they want that can be valued, it becomes how do you distribute it? The other side of it is for consumers is you're making it easier to consume and a better experience to consume, but also coming down the funnel to collect. I mean, I think it's like there's a world where like people can consume everything for free and never collect anything. In this, like, there could basically be those people that they could do that, and they'll have a pretty like low relationship life online. Like, you want to like, it's basically it'll become the only way and the best way and the only way to like show meaning and have relationships and like that, like online. And yeah, everyone's going to want to do it. Everyone's going to need to do it, really. So like,
Yeah.
It's kind of like you can go listen to an artist that you're interested in listening to for the first time for free, and you can always do it for free, but like you'll always just be someone that's just listening to that no one knows about or that isn't a part of it until you like do some sort of form of engagement, or maybe you're part of the creation process, or you actually have ownership in the content, and that's when it becomes real. But yeah, so for the consumer, it's like it's a better experience because like you don't have to pay. Yeah, you're not paying $10 a month, but also you get the opportunity to honestly to spend even more and have even more meaning.
I think Brett, like if we look at how platforms today work for creators like TikTok, like liking something on TikTok and that going to your liked folder, right, is very analogous to collecting something and that hitting your wallet. But the beauty behind that is like it's not gated. So if a creator continues to build beyond TikTok across Instagram or Substack, Medium, whatever it may be, right, like you can see that entire activity and who your community is across all these platforms, right?
Yeah,
And
it's an interesting point.
I think a lot of creators have yet to have sort of like that aha moment and realizing that. But you want to say something to that?
Yeah, it brings up a big point too. It's like, and this is definitely worth mentioning. It's like this also fundamentally changed the concept of exclusive content, right? Like a lot of the reason why exclusive content has been created is because creators aren't monetizing like how they want to, so they have to put up gated walls and charge people and get them to see certain things. I don't think creators really want to do exclusive content. Like it's like extra work, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's like, oh, like a lot of people are already, if you're already posting on Instagram or something and like you're like, all right, how do I make money? It's like, okay, you got to like come up with some behind the scenes content. It's like, you gotta add another layer. You got to work from that angle in order to have this other, and it's like a lot of work. And it's like, you're already doing things that are attracting a bunch of eyes and people love what you're doing. Now you have to do another level of things just to get people to pay. Yeah. And in reality, like that content that you're putting behind the paywall could be amazing content to put out that would make you even more popular, that more people appreciate and you grow your audience, right? So it's like this whole thing of exclusive content is kind of like it's a solution, but it like almost works against the creator in a lot of ways. 100%. And like in this world where like you have this settlement layer, this value capture, like at the content, the distribution becomes more free. It becomes more open, like how we were saying, right? And like, so now in this world, it's like, what's the point of exclusive content? Like, why do we even need exclusive content anymore? Like, now it's like, right? I mean, I think it could be preferences of the artist, preference of the creator, preferences of the audience. Maybe they're like, they just love the idea of there being something special, and like that's only certain people can get to, and like, you know, maybe it's tiered or something, and like maybe there's something that's like that's part of the relationship, the connection there. And if you want that, great, but you shouldn't be forced into that, right? And like, you should be able to do your thing how you want to do it, and like people come down your funnel and value your work, and you get what you deserve for that directly with no cap on your own terms, right? And so I think a lot of the stuff around like what we look at exclusive content today, and like if you're like, oh, doesn't make sense, even in a lot of examples that we see today in the NFT space where it's like, oh, like I'm going to add value by adding some gated content, or like, you know, you have to buy the NFT in order to see it, right? Things like that, or almost counterintuitive to like the business model of like what we're doing here and the NFTs. And I think over time things are just going to move towards like caring much less about distribution rights and copyrights, and caring much less about you know, like added little layers of utility to like to gate things like that. And it's just going to be like, just do your best work, put it out there, and get what you deserve, you know, and grow your community and do your thing. And like, and it's a beautiful thing, right? Because when you think about it, a lot, like this could eat, like the type of content we haven't even talked about, right, is like some of the most popular type of content is like lifestyle content, right? You're on social media, post photos of your life, right? And like, that is probably one of the later markets that we'll see like people starting to buy, but it'll get there. Like it'll get there, right? And in that world where like the way people make money is brand partnerships, right? Like your content gets like almost worse and less engaged with because of your brand partnerships, right? Like influencers don't like want to really post, like do inorganic promotions and stuff like that, and like those end up getting the worst engagement, like by like half the amount usually, right? And it's not like what they love and what they do, like, so it's kind of like in this world of like your content being valued directly, like you got to just make the stuff that you want to make, and that gets valued, and you get paid. Like, you don't have, like, now all of a sudden brands and advertising and things like that, the whole dynamic changes where like you get to just make your best favorite things that do the best, that grow your community the best, like, and get the value back for that. And it's going to slot those brands and advertisers, et cetera, in a different lane to be able to have to figure out.
And I think at this point I would put the ad slot, the sponsor ad.
Well, I mean, look, I mean, think about it. I mean, I've had this conversation with you before. I was like, Adam, why don't you go full on chain with your podcast, right? Like, I think like in reality, like that one podcast we did generated like $3,000, right? And you do what, 25 podcasts?
Yeah. It generated like close to $1,000. Yeah. If it was like bull market vibes, then the ETH would be worth $3,000.
Well, it was one ETH, and then the ETH was at what, 2,500, $3,000 at that time.
It was like 13, 1,400. No, like 1,000 even, something like that. It wasn't even a full. It wasn't a full ETH. It was like 0.75 or something.
No, it was like ended up being like 0.99.
I could be mistaken. I gotta double check.
I remember. It ended up being like 0.99, okay. And it was like, and ETH was still above 2K for sure. Like, okay. ETH only hit $1,000. Like, it was pretty quick when it was that low.
Yeah,
like,
it was pretty quick.
You know,
despite
we're back there
whatever
now.
It was worth. Yeah, despite whatever.
Anyways,
it was
the point
it was monumental. Yeah,
it was real, right? Like, let's say it was 2,500, right? So like that times 25 podcasts is probably more than branding. I don't know. I want to get exposure to the podcast financials on the podcast, but like the point is like all of a sudden, like the leverage of the brand, the reason like where you have to include in your content, like it changes when you can just like have people love what you're doing and buy it directly and appreciate it, and then it's like, and then like, yeah, it just like puts the ball back in your court. Sure, you can still do advertising and stuff. You can still do all those things, and it's the same way that like when you create music NFTs, you can still put your music on Spotify. Like the point, it's actually more open. It's super copacetic. Like it can use all these things that are already out there. The thing is just like people will realize over time, it's like the Web3 native tools that are building the life cycle around NFTs are just the better options and monetize better and grow your audience and show your content better. Like it's kind of a crazy stat. Like I bet if you went and did some analytics, maybe you could do it on Bello, is like what is the correspondence between the success on like Web 2 distribution platforms of that content in comparison to the Web 3, right? You posting your things, like, yeah, I mean, the best example obviously is when you look at music NFTs and you see like how many streams does Daniel Allen get, right? Not many. Like, it's crazy, right? But the music is amazing and people love it. And it's the most popular, highest selling music in Web3, right?
Right.
Like, I think like, yeah, if you were to compare the numbers, it's something drastic, like almost like $1 million in NFTs versus like 10 grand or something like that. Yeah, it's something insane, right? So like, it's just like for him, like when that business model starts to work and creators come up in that, what are you going to focus on? You're going to focus on growing your distribution on Spotify, or you're going to focus on growing your distribution on SpinAmp, right? Because that's elevating your NFT. There's a buy button on SpinAmp. There's no buy button on Spotify that integrates directly, right? So like, so it's like the correspondence is like already kind of low, and it's like only lower as it goes like upstream, basically. So yeah, I think like it'd be interesting to see the actual data. I mean, like, I see it every day in like different examples, but like, Twitter, like your Instagram followers versus your Twitter followers, because your Twitter is all crypto versus your Web3, which is your content distribution on Spotify and on YouTube for video NFTs in comparison, or your digital art on Instagram versus your crypto art sales. Like, I mean, like, right, you're like these like people is definitely focusing less on Instagram now, right? I gotta imagine. So I think like that this is it's creating new rails, new pipeline, new things to focus on. And like I think a lot of the big thing here too is like people try to bridge our most popular examples and how they fit in here. Like you might say like, well, what about a famous musician or a famous, like, how does something like that come into it? And it's
always
like
the what if,
yeah, it's not really one-to-one, right? Like in a lot of ways, this is a foundation for the next generation of creators, right? It's really for the new people, the underdogs, people just starting, right? And that's where the counterculture comes. I mean, if you look at like music NFTs and crypto art, right? I wasn't necessarily a big traditional art collector or anything. Like I didn't really know traditional art before I started collecting crypto art. So like it's hard for me to compare that. But I've been listening to music forever. I know a lot of musicians since I was a kid, and I love music, right? And I was on Spotify all the time, right? I think like when you look at the difference of the culture of the sounds, like the art itself and the content itself, it's different. It's a counterculture within its own. Like it's a counterculture already because it's like the underdog. It's the new system. It's like it's the new business model. It's the next generation of artists. It's the independents, right? But the sounds, the content that's coming out is also new, different, cooler. The counterculture, right? Like it's like listen to like Daniel Allen with Rio, Gorgeous, right? Listen to like what Rio just dropped the frameworks and what Daniel did with Glass House. Like listen to Latasha out there. Like listen to like Bloody White. Like the sounds they're making. I mean, it's like there's nothing you can't go and say, oh, this is that person over here. Like it's completely new sounds. It's completely new genres. Like the content, because it's like it's such a new generation and their creative freedom. It's because of like the way it works. They don't have to enter the existing system and be influenced by whatever agency. It's the full creative control. It's the full control over your content. It's the ownership. It's the upstream, like that kind of not worrying about the upstream distribution and letting it come to you and have that. It is changing the culture of the content we create and making people be more freely. Some of my favorite tweets are things that are like, I would never have created and made that song out, and it's my favorite song and I love it. And like I don't think I ever would have got to that point to make that song or do that if I wasn't focusing on music NFTs, right? And it's just like it's enabling an even better culture and environment to create in, which is like making the sounds and the content even better.
Step out from the creators, like the consumers, us. Like I find myself often digging through my friends' wallets trying to find music that they collected and listen to that. Like I've discovered Bloody White through Spin 808's wallet, right?
Sick.
And just kind of like going through what he was collecting because I like his taste and listening to some of that stuff and be like, wow, this is a really great song. And then guess what I did right afterwards? I went and collected it, you know? And it's sort of like it's changed the entire behavior of consumption. It's changed the entire behavior of creation. And I think you nailed it. And I wrote this down: new sounds, new genres, new platforms. Like that's Web3. and Web3, here's another great quote. Like Web3 is built for the next generation of creators. Like I love that. I think it's a great way to sort of sum up this entire conversation and to sort of add the cherry on top on this brand new article that you put together. Brett, before I let you go, I want to be very cognizant of like the time that we're in crypto today. It's like beyond the bear market. People are getting slashed left and right. Very unfortunately, people are losing a lot of money trusting all these different applications, funds, platforms, exchanges. How can creators keep their heads up and continue creating, especially when they're seeing all these external events kind of like triggering their new environment?
Yeah, I mean, it's more correlated now than it will ever be again going forward. It just gets less and less correlated. Like the prices of whatever FTT and Sol and the collateral damage to other tokens and all of this, like even the the effect it has on people's liquidity to buy NFTs, like it's more tied together now than ever. It all came from one place. In 2017, there was only ICOs, right? Like we're expanding into more and more categories. It becomes more and more separate over time. But I mean, what I love to see is like, I mean, it's crazy. Like if you're on Sound right now, if you're on Glass right now, it looks like all-time highs. Like it's unaffected. Like, I mean, Daniel Allen's floor just got swept like 13 ETH yesterday on like a bloodbath, right? Like
crazy.
Like or the other day, right? Like you have like Rio Cragen does a last minute 1 hour notice drop, sells out in less than a minute, right? Like things that are doing well, content that's doing well, that communities that are growing around these creators and these content, like they don't care about anything else. Like people just want. I mean, you could probably price in USDC and just get people to hold USDC, and they'll just like, it doesn't need to be an ETH, right? Like it could just be like, this is like, it's its own, like content is its own vertical of assets. Yeah. Like obviously things are cross correlated and affected, like no doubt, like, but it's crazy though when you come and you see the culture that's going on around, what's cultivating and like where things are at. Like there's more drops than ever on Sound. There's more drops than ever on music NFTs right now. There's more drops than ever in video NFTs, articles, all types of content. They're selling better than ever. The floor prices are higher than ever. It's like if you only looked at that and didn't look anywhere else, you wouldn't even know we're in a bear market. Right? It's
like
crazy.
Very, very, very simply put, like just share a quick graph. Like this is taken from the Sound Collectors group chat in Telegram. And David just posted this, right? Like October 24th, 34 drops. The week of October 24th, 34 drops. The week of October 31st, 42 drops. The week of November 7th, 46 drops.
Week of November 7th, worst week of crypto, like one of the worst weeks of crypto ever, all-time high. Music NFTs minted on Sound and sold.
Yeah, and sold. Yeah, like wild.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Right. And it's
just
like
keep building, just keep creating, just keep swimming.
It's growing. It's growing. Trust what we have, trust what we're building, expand on it. What's going on, what's being built now isn't wrong. It's great. It's right. It's like, it's not, don't come and say, what can I say is wrong about what exists in NFTs and then like go and fix it and raise some money and build. Come and look at what's right, love it, appreciate it, and look what it needs. Build for the next layer, build for the next piece of content, build for the next layer on top of NFTs.
Yeah.
Everything's going to work. Everything can work together, like more interoperate, be composable more than ever. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's a really, really bright future. Like, I think when you fast forward all the way out, like, who knows how long this takes? I think quicker than most people would predict. Because I'll tell you why I think that. Crypto art went from $0 to like $1 billion in like 3 years in market cap, right? No one expected that. And that period of time, when it was like at $0 and there was no volume and it was like just super rare, right? Like, there was no concept of NFTs really even. People weren't even buying NFTs. Sure. Now, like, it's like a snowball effect. I think it just starts to happen quicker and quicker and quicker as you expand from one piece of content to the next, right? So like now we're at music, right? Or we're at multiple types of content, but like you look at where we're at with music, we went from like, 1 million to like 20, like pretty quickly, less than a year or something like that, right? So like, and that 0 to 20 or that 1 to 20 in crypto art took 2 years, 2.5 years, right? So like it just like it snowballs. It happens quicker. People get more comfortable. The perception of the biggest questions, some of the biggest questions have already been answered, right? Can digital things be valuable? Can things that are seen by everyone but only owned by a few be valuable to those few, right? Like these questions, these psychological barriers have been broken, and like it's just a snowball effect to other types of content, and it's gonna. So yeah, basically, but fast forward all the way out, like you look at like a disruption to all verticals of content and applications on those contents that we see so far, all the way from like whatever the Sotheby's of art, right, to the Spotify for music, to the YouTube for videos, to the Netflix for TV and film, to like everything is up. All of it is up for grabs. Like in this new, like foundationally NFT based business model, new layers of apps, all the way up to the Web3 social layer, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, like going to be NFT based. So I think, look, like how long it's going to take. It's going to take some time, obviously, but like I think it'll happen quicker than we feel like it's going to happen. It's going to go quick. Like I don't know. By the time music NFTs is at the size of where crypto art is now, things come in cycles a little bit as well. Crypto, I mean, the correlation with speculation and stuff, but I don't think we're more than a couple or a few years out from like some crazy, like some really big size music NFT market and a lot of proof of other forms of content markets also having serious sizes. I mean, like you can also say like I skipped over articles, Medium, right? Mirror to Medium, right? Like all these companies have parallels to like things that we're seeing now.
So writers, digital and visual artists, musicians, what are the next class of creators? Like video creators, you'd argue?
Yeah, I think video has started.
Video.
Like video has started. I think articles has started writers like in a smaller way, but I think that'll grow. I think culturally, a lot of people in this ecosystem are try to think ahead and share those thoughts. So like that's natural. There's a lot of video creators as well. I think podcasts have already like are going to come. Like there's been a few examples. Like it's a matter of time until like that continues to compound and grow a little bit, and more people are starting to do it. I think film and TV has started a pretty decent amount. Like there was some early crowdfunds on Mirror around like some TV shows and some documentaries. That's kind of a glimpse, I think. There's some other cool things too that are kind of like story based infrastructure, like community infrastructure for writers, like writer room, DAO infrastructure for writer rooms, like thinking about how to like take the IP in a movie and like make NFTs around it. I don't necessarily think that's like they're in their like, their end state. I think that stuff is very early still, but like, yeah, TV and film is for sure coming. I think at some point we'll get to like lifestyle content, like social media, lifestyle content even. I mean, like there's big fans for, just Instagram influencer, quote unquote, right? Like there's some real audiences, there's some real fans and audiences out there that appreciate it and love what they do and their suggestions and like whatever. So I think it'll get like, that might be, I would say like maybe one of the later categories, just like, I don't know, I guess Instagram did just add like minting and stuff. So maybe you'll get some people minting there. But yeah, I just think in reality, you need like a bit of a healthy market on both sides. You need some demand. You need people like ready, excited to buy, be a part of it.
Sure.
And by the way, how do you create, like, to go from one market to the next? I think it's smart the way some of these companies are doing it, like pricing it lower, making it easier for entrants to appreciate that it can be valuable, right? Like, I mean, at this point, when it comes to like video NFTs and article NFTs, like I don't know what the average prices of those. I probably am not doing it justice by actually getting it, but it's like something like $10 to $50 in that range versus music NFTs probably 200 plus, or I don't know, right? Like 100 plus, right? Like, so it's kind of like these newer industries. Like, look, the demand isn't as big yet. You need more content. Content is king. You need to get more people creating content, and then you need people to come appreciate the content and start building it. Obviously, if you go faster in content than people appreciating it, then there's a supply and demand aspect here. There's a market. So yeah, it's something to be careful about. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like there's going to be some mismatches, and there being more creators or not enough creators, and more collectors or not enough collectors. But it's just the amount of content, the amount of creators, amount of collectors over time are just going to grow, right? Yeah. And it'll just
Brett, I think this is the longest episode I've had. So props to you, my guy. This has been fantastic. Before I let you go, where can we find you? Where can we find and learn more about PTC? And all the cool things you're doing?
I'm on Twitter, BlockchainBrett.
Right.
Palm Tree Crew, Crypto, PTC Crypto for short. You can find us on Twitter too. Palm Tree Crypto is the handle. Follow us there. That's amazing. That's really it. Hit me up there. Like, also go to our site, ptccrypto.xyz. It has more information about the fund, companies we've invested in, a little bit about our thesis. This article that I release and this podcast will be on that page. And you can get in contact with me there. I think I have my email and some other info on there.
You always know it's a legit episode when sort of like the sun sets, right, in the middle of the episode, and it goes from light to dark, and the only thing that's keeping you up is the lights in the office. So I appreciate you being on the pod for so long. I'm really glad we did this round 2. I can't wait for round 3, but until next time, man, we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for having me on, Adam. I love Mint Podcast. It's my favorite.
Let's go.